Hello, you're very welcome to our podcast today, Unmuzzled Conversations, with me, Christine, my brother Stewart,
Hi there,
and our friend Tommy.
Hello.
So every week we're here and we're sharing with you our nostalgic and humorous views about Glasgow from the 1940s right up until the present day, covering subjects of the time and our own memories as well of being brought up and living in Glasgow. So let's get cracking. Put the kettle on or pour yourself a drink and spend some time with us. Today we are talking about theatre. Glasgow has been known as a city of hugely people who absolutely love the theatre, going right back to the beginning of the 19th century. But today we're going to talk about the 1960s because those are our memories of going to the theatre, me as a wee girl. So let's just start with going to the theatre in the 60s, regular programme changes that you were talking about and you were talking about, Tommy. Maybe you'd like to sort of talk about that, how the regular changes were and what kind of people we were going to look at, and watch in these days. So we had the Lex McLean thing, for example.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
I thought Tommy was going to jump.
Tommy, right.
Can I just say, Christine, we forgot to mention that the Chinese government have been following our podcasts.
You're right, I forgot.
And after doing the one about Edinburgh, they took their pandas back. They realised the gay vibe in Edinburgh was just not going to achieve the baby panda that they hoped for. So they just said, fuck this, pulling the plug, we're taking them home and see if they can get a scene 2 back in China and something will result from it. So I just thought you deserve credit for that, Christine, because it's all yours. And too bad for Edinburgh. But I'm sure the pandas are. I'm speaking on behalf of the pandas. Thanks very much.
Personally, I think another alternative would have been bring them to Glasgow.
Well, that was the obvious one. I didn't want to rub it in, Christine. That's why.
Glasgow, China, Glasgow.
A wee weekend in Glasgow, the vibe might have come back.
Listen, they'd have been pure sorted, no danger.
Where are you going to find the bamboo shoots?
They could be found.
The barras again, back to the barras.
The guy's selling them.
If you couldn't find them, the barras, they don't exist. It's as simple as that. So we both remember, don't we, Stuart, going to see Lex McLean. We'll hear your memories too, Tommy, about sitting up in the gods. That's my memory. Well,
I think I don't remember sitting in the gods seeing Lex McLean, Christine.
Well,
fair enough. I don't remember that, but I tell you the fun. Well, Lex McLean was a guy from Glasgow. He was really quite a funny guy, but he was very typical of tons of comedians throughout the United Kingdom at the same time. Mm-hmm. And his big thing was following the Rangers. He was a total Rangers man, and he didn't do matinees and Saturdays, and he could have made a fortune, and probably even then a couple of grand a Saturday he could have personally made, but he didn't do it because he was always at Ibrox. But he get barred from Ibrox because he told this joke, and it was about Rangers were doing really, really badly. It was in the late 60s, and I think the manager, a guy called Davy White.
Yes.
And what was it? And there was a guy called, who was it, the coach? Was it a guy Kinnear?
David Kinnear.
David Kinnear was the coach. David Kinnear was the coach, right? Mm-hmm. So apparently the Rangers are doing really badly, and Davy White says to David Kinnear, the coach, look, we'll need to do something about get the boys, their morale's rock bottom. He says, what about lining up a lot of dustbins and letting them buy the dustbins and put the ball into the net? That would cheer them up. He said, that's a good idea, boss. I'll go ahead and do that. So half an hour later, he comes back up to speak to David White. And David White says, how's it going with the boys? He says, they're really down. He says, what happened? He says, the dustbins won 4-1. So the humorless directors at Ibrox took the total hump and said he was barred. But I don't know how long that lasted. They made total fools of themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have... Sorry,
there was another one of his famous because always the Rangers jokes. And can I also say that because he was obviously such an overt Rangers supporter and was not shy about it in any way because it gave him an audience. Yeah. But there was also another comedian called Glenn Daly who had the Celtic faction in the pavilion, and they took the took most of his audience from that faction as well, and they probably swap jokes
Probably.
between
There was
each other
nothing.
because you could.
There was no animosity between them,
No,
though. It was
no.
just funny. They never, I mean, I've got to Lex McLean never slated Celtic, ever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Glenn Daly never slated Rangers. They had seen their audience, they thought it was going well, in pretty good spirit, as these things can, as they could go. And it went well.
He did say, I remember a Lex McLean joke at the Pavilion when he said that he said, we were talking about when Rangers are doing so badly. He says they'd signed a sea lion who was absolutely fantastic with the ball, and you could put it and it could catch you in the nose and flip through and get right into the goal. And they said, but they get rid of it because they found out it fishing a Friday.
Couldn't you have that?
Because in that time that was
Well, that was a no-no.
they were very sectarian at that time.
Very much so. I don't remember Glenn Daly except for Glenn Daly at the Ashfields.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know he did anything else. How ignorant am I? I didn't know that he would. So he was like on the same footing as Lex McLean, was
He wasn't
Glenn
as
Daly?
big, though.
No, not quite
He
as
wasn't
big.
as funny either, Glenn Daly.
But he was
He
more
was
of
a
a
singer.
singer.
He was a
as
singer.
well.
was he?
That's-
He
that's
does the
That's
Celtic.
probably
They
what
still
he
play
did.
him.
That's right.
They still play him at Celtic Park.
Oh, do
He
they?
sings the Celtic song.
At this age?
Yes.
He must
No,
be.
he's dead.
No.
But
no.
he's
The recording of
to be a
it.
bit
You
too
think he was
hard,
lying? Remember, I'm going to throw a sin. This is dead funny. One of the years that Rangers won the league in the very last game of the season, they had the Rangers song has been adopted as Simply the Best, the
Yeah.
Tina Turner, and there was these two guys behind us, we were season ticket holders, and they were quite clever. We didn't really know them, but you could hear their conversation before the game started. And they were both businessmen. I think they came from Fife or someplace because they would talk about their drive into the city. And here, before the game, they get this black lass out to mime Simply the Best. And this guy says behind us, God, it must have cost them a few quid to get Tina in to do this. I've gone, what? Just a lassie miming.
I'm tempted to say something that I absolutely won't, but so those were happy days. But I do always also remember that some of the Lex McLean stuff, because I would be quite young at this time, I mean primary school age, it was quite blue, was it?
Aye, it was.
Was
Do you know
it?
what? I'll tell you the one that I always remember, and I'll not say any more about Lex McLean after this. There was one he did, and you have to remember, this is the 60s, and in theory, every bride was a virgin, right? You know. So there's this sketch he did, and he's a drunk man, and he's gone back to his house, and they've got a scene up where his wife is in the
Tenement building.
She's in a tenement building,
Aye.
and he rattles the door, and she doesn't answer. And here she comes to the window, she opens the window, and it's an actress. Her name is Margot Bentley.
Oh, yeah.
She's a big kind of it's chorus girl looking, big, attractive woman. And so she opens, she's got her hair in colours, and she goes, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I want in." And she says, "I'm not letting you in." He said, "I want to get in. You need to let me in. I'm not letting you in." She puts the window down again,
yeah.
and he shouts out, and he says, "Well, if you don't let me in, I'm going to embarrass you and humiliate you." And she opens the window and she goes, "Well, on you go. I don't care." Right then, and he looks about, assuming that everybody's watching or listening.
Which they would be listening if they weren't watching.
And he
yeah.
goes, "We did it before one merit. We did it before one merit." And she opens the window and goes, "And so did all your pals." Brought the house down. So that, in those days, that was really risky.
Absolutely. I just remember my mum kind of being a wee bit like that sometimes, but I think it just went over in my head. I could tell by her the way that she was acting that it wasn't always quite right for me. And of course there was the Francie and Josie. Tommy, tell us your memories of going to see Francie. I mean, like in the 60s. They would be quite new then, would they, in the 60s, Francie and Josie? No?
This time. This is the late 60s, early 70s by the time we were watching them. They've been going since the early 60s, Christine, about 1962.
In the theatre?
62. Well,
In the theatre and in the telly?
on the telly anyway.
So did the telly come before the theatre or was it the other way around?
I don't know.
No, theatre first.
Theatre first, yeah.
They were well known. It's a well known act, duo, the Francie and Josie thing. They're actually big in the theatre. And somebody, don't forget, STV Studios was up the road for the Pavilion at that time. They just up, so they would get the feedback back and forth from that sort of thing. And Ricky Fulton was also doing stuff as well on his own.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing. But
we were just actually saying that we couldn't remember anything else that Jack Mulroy did. Apart from Francie and Josie, I know Ricky Fulton, even in his older years, he's doing that Reverend I Am Jolly.
Yes,
and I mean,
yes.
so
He did
he
his own
was-
show, mind.
Yeah,
Aye,
the Ricky Fulton show.
that's it,
So we were just trying to think, when Francie and Josie ended, what did Jack Mulroy do?
Jack Mulroy, as you say, certainly was not didn't pull an audience on his own.
Yeah.
He actually went out with his wife, and they did a duo.
Oh, did
Mary
they?
Lee was his
Oh,
wife.
Mary Lee,
and,
of course, I do
and
remember
They
that,
went
yeah.
out and they did an act as well. I think but as you say, it doesn't have the same appeal as
Francie
sort
and
of
Josie
worldwide
thing.
appeal, or should I say nationwide appeal, as Ricky Fulton. And Ricky Fulton had a great career.
Yeah.
To remember, Ricky Fulton actually played a KGB
Aye.
agent in Gorky Park.
Aye, so he did.
Which, and they said he looked a right evil so and so. So that's how when he got the audition for it. You know, so
So when would that be, Gorky Park?
Early 80s. I
Early
remember
80s.
watching it, and I got it out in video. And I remember it was very, very slow. I thought, Jesus Christ, this is terrible. But I paid my £2, so I'm going to watch it. And it ended up really good. It really was. It's quite a long film. But I remember hearing about his interview for it. He didn't want to do the interview. He didn't want to do the odd audition. He said he wasn't feeling well. He says he just did it as a favour to somebody, and he said he was really, really quite malevolent when he was doing it, and it worked for him. They just said, right, you're just a man for us.
Yeah,
and he was
because it seems an unlikely
well, you wouldn't
choice.
believe it, would
because we
you?
only think of him with comedy, don't we? We don't
Aye.
really think of him.
Even
as
somebody
doing
called
anything else.
Ricky. You don't take anybody called Ricky seriously, do you? But
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
with an eye.
Ricky
With an eye,
Like
that's
Tommy
it.
with an
like
eye.
Tommy.
Are
Tommy
you
with an
talking
eye.
about an eye?
Yes.
Oh no.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, he's christened me with a.
Well, Jimmi
you know,
Hendrix. I thought
you
Jimmi
know.
Hendrix, Tommy McNee.
I'm
Jimmy
going to
had
take
an eye.
that because I've always used a Y.
Oh.
Makes you feel a bit more common, Tommy, I suppose.
I think it was it put me into the German version of it
right.
anyway.
Jimmi Hendrix.
He wants to make you
Oh, is that what it
continental.
was?
Jimmi
Jimmy?
Hendrix.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, the
So-
Pavilion's great theatre, and I think it's of the best Glasgow theatre that we.
Would you
we
think it was
consider
quite
it's still
small,
there.
Tommy? A
Small theatre.
Small
Do you know
theatre.
Do you know the roof opens?
No.
Do you know the roof opens? I took my grandkids to the pantomime. Now they're 15 now, so they would be 4 or 5 years of age.
About 10 years ago then.
So it was 10 years ago anyway. And what's his name? It was Dean Park and
Oh, yeah.
that
The
was
usual
doing
subjects.
they were doing
Suspects.
the panto.
Aye.
Doing it for the panto.
Was Chris in it?
And
Chris McClure in it?
it wasn't in that version. No, it wasn't in that one. But you're right. He did
does
that
quite a
as
few.
well. Chris did it
They'll be
too.
doing local ones.
But what's the big girl? It's a great
Elaine
singer.
C. Smith.
No, younger. She won.
Oh, aye.
one of these,
McManus.
Michelle McManus.
Michelle
Michelle
McManus.
McManus. She was in it, sang as well. And a good night, and this was happened to be a good night during that run. It was a lovely dry night, and they opened the roof.
My
And
goodness.
they must have had people with the buckets with snowflakes.
Oh,
right.
brilliant.
And it was fantastic. The
yeah.
kids were mesmerised.
Oh, of course. So would I be if
Oh,
it
right.
happened
I
that I
thought
was
it was
there.
a fantastic thing.
Great touch. Yeah.
And my other, I get a funniest story from that actually happened. I was actually doing the Connelly show there, his first big Connelly show there, and it was they decided they didn't know how to present it, so it became more like a variety act. Like they'd no idea how to present Billy as just an individual act. Chris did some sketches with them.
Was this
things like
completely,
that.
I was just going to say, was it completely musical, or was he doing
was-
some funny sketches as well? Or?
He was doing some
Both?
music. He was doing music. Billy was doing some stuff with the guitar, but they had a mime artist on who was very good. You know, they had a mime artist on, and the show started with the classic, like the Palladium type dancers, like the Tiller Girls
God,
type of thing,
God,
right? And they were all, you know, the jewel encrusted costumes
outfits,
with the big
feathers,
plumed feathers on it, and through the various rehearsals, they were to start off. The show started off with them, and there was because it was rehearsals. They started off. They were actually on the floor, and they said they would have dry ice.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And they would rise out of this dry ice. I don't know who was. I can't even remember who was the director of the show at the time. But he said they would rise out of this dry ice, and they played some background music, and they would dance around a bit, and then that was it. And then next thing, so but they didn't want to use dry ice in any of the rehearsals. They only used dry ice. So they've got a dry ice machine, which now is just a smoke. It's a canister,
smoke machine, yeah.
Right? It's a smoke machine. But then it was, they used to put dry ice into
Actual
boiling
dry ice.
water,
Right.
And then it blew the dry ice down.
God. Uh-huh.
And there's a very famous stage manager who said, whose name is still bandied about, who was in charge of the dry ice, and they only used it for the start of the show. They were never using it before that. They were just, so he put too much water into the machine. So when he put the dry ice in, the water overflowed. Now all stages are on a slope.
God.
All stages are on a slope. Every theatre stage goes down so that actors at the back can be higher
Oh,
than the
that
front.
makes sense.
For this perspective. So these women with all this, these
Finery.
dancers are lying there, right, and the smoke drifts towards them.
So
But
there was
then-
some smoke then?
Yes, there was
Some-
the smoke, but they didn't know water had overflowed. And the next thing you heard was, just before the curtain went up, "My back's soaking."
Nice for the guests
Right.
to hear that.
And the next minute, what's that? "So is mine." Right. Hey, what the bloody hell's happened here?
Is that
And
all
the next
soaking
minute, they stopped it. They didn't open the curtain. They stopped the curtain. Never know they warmed it up.
So they would
and,
be going-
and if they'd opened up the curtains, maybe a few minutes later, you know, they would have seen these dancers. And with all their finery, with a mop and a pail, you know,
my
walking
God.
up. I need to get this water off
My
the blooming
God.
stage. You know, I'm not lying down in that again.
Aye.
You know, they were all thinking to dry it all up again and then start all over again.
So it just goes to show you need to practice everything, doesn't it? You need to actually test everything.
They should have.
Yeah.
They should have done it before, but they were obviously. Probably financially, they said, "Oh, we're not going to spend
Be the
money on
mops,
that."
we'll be okay with that. What about the Francine Josie thing, though? Did your mum take you? Because I think my mum took me.
Yes.
So did you go with your pals? Or
When
like,
We
when
went
would they
about
think?
1970.
We went 97 right then, but
Was I met you
what-
about
I saw-
1969 or
I
1970?
saw them before that. Certainly, I mean, I'm just trying to think if I saw them in whether
so you were clearly fans. I mean, what ages were you then in the 70s? What ages were you in your 20s
late
then?
the
or-
20s. I was
Aye.
in
So
the
that's
20s.
interesting that
teenager.
men in their 20s were going to see Francine Josie.
Because
That
there was like happy memories of your childhood
Aye.
as well. I mean, they were very much kids entertainers that you know fell into adult stuff.
So
It was
one of my
a-
favourite albums is Francine Josie live at the Ashfield Club.
Oh,
And,
really?
it's a
All the
great-
songs.
All the songs.
We used to
were
sing it.
great.
What was the one about
the Glasgow
Underground?
Underground?
Oh, just
and that,
brilliant.
you know,
You've never been. What? You've never been.
never lived unless you've
Travelled on the
on
Glasgow.
Underground.
You go through all the stations.
West
It's quite
Street,
funny.
George Street, and all that.
right.
Quite funny,
I forgot the sang as well.
We had the
that's
LP.
Aye,
We had the LP in the flat. I used to
think
sing it in the flat.
it was on all the time as the Francie and Josie, the Glasgow Highland Games and things like
Oh,
that.
really?
There was all these songs.
Remember the suits they had, those outrageous suits, the red and the blue suits.
The
And
Teddy
then-
Boy.
The
Aye.
Teddy
The
Boy
Teddy
suits.
Boy
And then Ricky
suits.
Fulton's had a big... Was that,
It was
it looked
almost-
like a question
it was
mark
almost like
in the
a
back of the
question
wig,
mark, yeah.
a big bit of hair coming out. So they even looked funny before they even spoke,
aye.
and had these kind of dour
Glaikit-
expressions,
glaikit looks,
really
aye.
glaikit looks. So how long did they last for? We're talking about the 60s here. Did that go up? Well, I've not got a note here how long they were going for. Because I think that when they progressed to the telly, that would be it. They wouldn't go back to the theatre, I would imagine. Or did they go?
They were on the telly early 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and then Tommy and I would be seeing them all. Tommy obviously saw them before that, but when Tommy and I and another friend, Tommy Howitt, the three of us used to go, that would be early 70s.
So I suppose being on the telly would create a bigger audience
aye,
because you know, to want to come and see you at the theatre.
You can only do, and that's what you did, comedians. That's why Lex McLean never did the telly for years and years, because it uses up all your material.
Yeah.
You know,
I think they must have been on the go. Well, I remember the last time I actually saw them, and I'm sorry that I didn't get either a photograph or other autographs
yeah.
at the time. Was they switched on the lights for Glasgow? Now that must have been about 1980, 81. They switched on the lights because I took my 4 or 5-year-old daughter then to watch that, because that's what we're there. Mum, come on, take you to see the lights, and excuse me. So they were in the what's the name of the hotel? Was it called the Copthorne then?
Yeah, on George Square.
On George Square,
yeah.
Right. So, and they used to, at the Copthorne, they had wee kind of seats outside, wee sort of verandas.
That's right. There's a wee kind of glass roofed veranda.
And we were sitting, we went early, we were
that was
sitting in there.
great.
And
Did
the
you
next
s-
thing,
yeah,
they
you-
were there. Obviously, they'd used that as their dressing room. And they come down, and they were standing right next to us before they went out to switch the lights on.
Oh, that was nice then.
Well, and with her.
I suppose one of the good things about them is they kind of left it. They didn't drag it out till they were really old.
Well, they
Did
were
they?
actually
Or
quite
were they?
old.
I'm trying to think.
I remember Tommy and I, the two Tommies and I were in a shop, this late night shop, just at Kelvin Bridge. And we were in, none of us smoked, I don't know why we were in there, but we were buying something. And Jack Mulroy came in,
That's
remember?
right,
And he was buying fags, I think, wasn't he? And I remember thinking, Christ, we were only boys at the time. I thought, he really does look old. You know, and he's a right kind of old face for a guy who maybe wasn't as old as I remember, but he really did. He
But
had
I think
aged.
that was part of the humour when you looked at Jack Mulroy as Josie. I mean, he was an old guy. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't trying to look young, and that was part of the humour, I think.
No,
Because
but-
he always looked old. He always looked quite lined and
well, he was.
yeah. So back in those days as well, that one of the
Excuse me.
other comedians going about that was our dad's favourite one was Chick Murray. Were you a fan, Tommy?
Brilliant. No, I absolute fan.
Absolute fan.
Um,
Did you ever go and see him?
saw Chick and actually spoke to him quite often because
you?
he used to stay he stayed in Cecil Street.
Did he?
Oh, right.
He eventually ended up there. I don't know, in his travels, it was later, but he ended up in Cecil Street, was in Hillhead off Great Western
Yeah.
Road.
Where I lived.
I was in
where
your
we
flat,
lived,
yeah.
That's it. Yeah,
And you lived
he
there as
wandered
well.
up there. That's it. And quite a few times, you know, there was there was people, you know, just guiding them home. You know.
Oh, that makes me sad.
I think he liked to drink.
He liked to
but
drink. Yeah, I
that's-
think he
that's
did
right,
like
you
to
know,
drink.
it's-
Yeah.
But absolute classic.
But can he kind of leave that time without mentioning, which I think is one of the funniest things that ever came from Glasgow, was Stanley Baxter's Parley Amo Glasgow. Because I think that's one of the cleverest things I have ever seen. And even if you're in a bookshop today, you'll find it there. It's still selling. People are still looking to buy it. And I think he himself was a clever man and a funny man, Stanley Baxter. But to come up with that, I think, was incredible, wasn't it?
Aye, it was.
What's the one that you remember, Stuart?
It's a pun of butter for a mother.
There you go.
Send this wee boy to the co-op. Ask for a panamana for a minute.
And you say, what the chap's actually saying. Wow. So when you do that kind of
Pound of butter for
Kelvin.
my mother.
But actually, that's how he spoke anyway, wasn't it?
Oh, he was totally laddie.
He was one of the darlings.
He did a brilliant whole sketch about Halloween, you know, and you know, duking for apples, and you know the teeth, the grandpa's teeth falling in, and I remember saying that, and that there was this cake, you know, and it says in the Halloween, Mum would make a Halloween cake, you know, and the thing, and the cry would go up, Hordis a bloody brick. Hordis. And when the teeth fell in, the cry went up, what I know, Matt, you bloke. You know, so, and then he did the translation.
So funny.
Yeah,
what was that wee story you were telling me this morning of a sketch that you remembered when he was acting as a Kelvin Side?
A Kelvin Side lady. No, he loved to dress up.
He did like
he loved to dress up in
didn't
women's
he?
clothes.
Yeah.
And it was this really posh woman. And it maybe with her neighbours. It was, you know, she was living, this is in a flat in Kelvin Side. And her neighbour came in with her daughter's baby, you know, her grandchild. And then she goes, they're all going, oh, he's lovely. Isn't he lovely? What do you think? And Stanley back, this character, looks at her and goes, oh, aye, he's lovely right enough. I always think a wee squint is so attractive.
That's a really typical, isn't it? A really typical Stanley Baxter thing to say. So I think probably of all of that time, he's probably my favourite, because even when you used to go to his pantomimes and things, they were outrageous. And I heard that the female dancers used to complain that the male dancers had far better costumes than the female, you know. And the money that was spent on his pantomimes were...
His TV shows apparently were the most expensive that anybody ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was him dressed up in women's clothes.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's still funny.
And obviously, no, but he only actually came out as gay last year.
And he's 90.
No, and he's 90. He's 90 something.
No,
and it
that's
actually just made full disclosure, as they call it.
And they were all so shocked.
No shit.
Never.
It's a surprise.
The thing about it was he kept denying it, because remember there was all the letters again about what's one of the guys in the Carry On films, the right outrageously gay one.
Kenneth
Williams.
Williams.
He was in a relationship with him for years and years, and they fell out. And Kenneth Williams, I think, threatened him with publishing the letters, and went ahead and published them. Instead of just saying, I mean, who nowadays even cares if you're gay, especially in showbiz? But he kept denying it. Was a bit of a downfall for him. He should have just put his hands up and said, yeah,
Some
I'm gay.
people just can't come to terms with themselves and things that happen. They just can't, and that's it. But it actually makes you look more silly, particularly in those... When would that be? When did the Kenneth Williams things, would that be kind of in the...
It wasn't maybe the 2000s.
2000s?
It wasn't that long ago. They were both pretty elderly at the time, even, you know, and you think, just own up. Who cares? You know, you just make yourself look cheap, in fact, to deny it.
So getting back to the theatres as well, there was also Here. Here, it was in the 70s?
1970.
1970. Did you see it, Tommy?
I saw it.
Did you see it, Stuart?
No, I didn't see it.
So you're the only one of us that actually saw it, Tommy?
I saw it, and a friend of ours was
Ricky Peebles was in it.
Ricky Peebles was in it, yeah.
Was cast in it as well, and he did the show, and I went to see it there. It was when the Metropole changed. Jimmy Logan bought a theatre up at George's Cross and renamed it the Jimmy Logan's Metropole.
I do remember
which
that,
was above the old Metropole, was actually up above the Scotia Bar down towards the Clyde. And that was the whole thing. That was went fire. But they managed to save the Scotia.
Thank goodness.
They saved the Scotia.
Thank goodness.
No, that's it. Save the pub. No, that's it. So let the theatre
Jimmy Logan's.
burn.
He's got money. You can pay for it. No. So it was Here as outrageous as people made it out to be. A lot of nudity and things like that.
No,
not really.
No, and the nudity was optional.
Okay.
It was very tastefully done, and there was this and obviously it was billed. I'm sure a lot of people went
just
there just
see people in the
hopefully
sky.
to see the
have a wee goosey.
to have a look downstairs,
Aye.
but
Oh, aye.
or upstairs as well,
I'm
But
sure you're right. Yeah.
but it was very, very tastefully done.
Because the thing is, you've got lighting as well,
They had
Tommy,
that-
in a
that's
stage,
right.
so it's not all. You can kind of
And
reduce the lighting.
This big, huge, diaphanous piece of material that they all went under,
Oh,
right?
right.
And then it was, I say, it was very optional. If they felt, up to it, then they could disrobe, and this thing floated up. And
So it was down to
basically
each individual cast member.
each cast member
Oh, I didn't know that.
were told you don't need. There's no compunction to do this. Just if you feel like it, do it. And I suppose some would be, people. There were some people who would genuinely want to be outrageous, and some who were,
some people quite happy with it, and other people not.
But it was all very tastefully
Oh, very
done.
tasteful. We
as they
have to
say.
believe it because you're the only human being I know that's seen it, so I have to believe that, Tommy. So thinking about the King's Theatre, the Metropole, and I was actually remembering about the Citizens Theatre because I used to go there when I was like a teenager, kind of an older teenager. I went around with quite a gay crowd for a lot of my teenage years, and so we were members of the Citizens and used to go a lot.
You lovies.
We were lovies. But lovies. And we went nearly all the time, and I think we saw, who did I tell you that we saw there? That really famous actor now who was a model to begin with and then became a really famous actor. Anyway, there was quite a lot of kind of London people coming up because it was seen to be quite avant-garde, the sits at that time. But anyway, getting back to the pavilion, it became a real venue for bands and some really quite almost international people like, T-Rex, Mud, Slade, David Bowie, Susie Quattro, the Jackson 5 and Dolly Parton. So, I mean...
Major stars.
Major stars that were there. And in the Empire Theatre, going back a wee bit further, you had people like Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy, and of course Roy Rogers. I can't believe are you actually serious in telling me that horse was actually flown over with him? I don't know if you're kidding me on or not.
No. Well, it was reported it was the Trigger.
It was the Trigger,
It was
and it was
a
actually
painted horse.
on the stage.
Aye. There was photographs. I remember as a kid, and I think he rode for publicity. I think he rode up and down the street on it and went in the front door, sitting on top of Trigger.
Of the Central?
Aye. No, at the theatre.
Oh, the theatre.
In the theatre, aye.
Of the theatre, right?
I'm sure there's photographs in the paper, and it was front page news. I mean, Roy Rogers was one of the biggest
Absolutely.
stars in the world at that time.
Aye. Because...
You forgot to mention Des O'Connor.
Yeah,
The
well,
Empire.
let's hear, because we're talking about the Empire, I did actually have the Des O'Connor story here and also the Ken Dodd story because you were talking about that because I was talking about what a difficult crowd Glaswegians could be and how it was really, I was thinking about these international, world-famous people coming all the way to Glasgow. With that slight doubt in your
chance of a
mind,
slaughtering.
am I going to get... Because these people are not long in telling you we don't like it.
Yeah, the reputation
The
went ahead of them.
reputation, totally. So in a way they were quite brave. But let's hear the Des O'Connor story, Stuart. And we'll hear Tommy's stories after
in
that.
fact, I just the kind of intro to it was Andy Cameron. Remember Andy Cameron?
I remember Andy Cameron.
Well, he was in the telly and he was talking about this, and it was his mother or his auntie worked in a laundrette that did all the theatrical costumes for all the theatres in Glasgow, and so his mother used to get tickets, and they were for things like Wednesday matinees. So Andy Cameron used to go to them all. He would go at night or whenever in the afternoon. Anyway, so he was describing the places. It was huge. He says it wasn't so much that people booed people; they would start off just being silent, and that's what really scared them. This giant audience, and people would be cracking jokes and they'd be
must be
singing,
horrible,
and
mustn't
there's
it?
silence, right? So that's the kind of background of it. But Des O'Connor was on and he was doing his English comedian thing and he wasn't doing very well. And there was, first of all, there was a very loud silence and there was a lot of booing going on. But he'd quite a long act and he'd lots and lots to do. And he thought, I can't cope with this. I'll pretend to faint. So he fainted and he's lying on the deck. And instead of people being silent and giving him sympathy, they got worse and they were booing him and booing him booing him. And he'd assumed that somebody would come on right away and put him in a stretcher or something and take him away. But they didn't. They just left him to be booed and catcalled for quite a long time. And finally somebody came on and they just grabbed him by the lapels and they dragged him off. And while they were dragging him off, he got even more boos. And the bottom line,
sympathy.
The bottom line was that was a matinee, so he had to come on again at night.
God,
Start again. And all the punters knew what had happened in the afternoon, so you don't know.
But tell us a bit more, Morecambe, why how they used that example for
they
other people as well.
If somebody wasn't very good, they used to say you went down like Des O'Connor at the Glasgow Empire. and they had Des on once, and they said that they were talking to him about it. And he says, you had the audience with you all the way. And he says, he says, but I managed to shake them off at the centre station. And
another one I quite liked was the Ken Dodd story that you were telling me this morning at the Empire when things were not going well for him.
Well, he was doing it again, and English comedians didn't go down well in Glasgow. They had to be pretty special. Some went down pretty well, but Ken Dodd, this was his first time, and he wasn't doing well at all. He was cracking all these different jokes and impersonations, and he actually cracked up. He says, I really lost it. He says, and he says, I've tried everything with you people. He's having a rant at the audience. He says, what the fuck would make you laugh? And silence, and this guy shouted out, a fucking comedian. But he himself nearly fell over laughing, and the crowd laughed, and he laughed at him, laughing at himself. So after that, it was okay. And he kind of revised himself, and he came back, and he was quite welcome after that, because at least he was seen to not take himself too seriously.
Brilliant stories. Have you got any, Tommy?
Oh, the other one for the Empire is Mike and Bernie Winters.
Oh, God, we were just talking about them earlier on. I won't tell you in what connection, but we were. They were horrors. Pure horrors.
And
Sorry, when would this be? What time? The 60s, 70s?
This would be in the 60s. This would be 60s.
The early 60s, because they were quite big.
But they had the Mike and Bernie Winters show.
Yeah,
remember that?
Yeah, so they're in it. It was the 60s, and so they come on, and their act started with Mike, who was quite a good musician, played clarinet, and he came on from the wings, right, playing the clarinet to silence, right. So they're
Makes me uncomfortable even talking about it.
So he's playing away, and some cabaret goes right up to the middle of the stage, and he's playing away, and there's nothing happening. and the next thing after that, then Bernie comes on, right. Now he's got the big, right. He's right. Mike's a straight man. He's the supposedly funny one, right? So he's got the big hat turned up, the brim turned up, and comes on with that kind of funny look and goes,
that's right. That was his thing, though.
Right,
that's what
that was his talent.
Right. And somebody says, "Oh fuck, there's two of them." No.
Welcome to Glasgow.
They just stared, right?
Frozen.
But in saying that, that being pros that they just soldiered on right through it to silence, and just went off again to silence. They probably said maybe whispered and said, "But we do a Des."
Because you're desperate.
It must have been a long half hour or whatever the stint was.
You know.
But then what could you do, Tommy? You would be booked. You would have maybe been paid, or you had to fulfill.
They were all owned by a company called Moss. Moss Empires were all over Britain. So when you were booked for Moss Empires, you went the length and breadth of Britain, wherever there was an empire.
I suppose if you pulled out though, you would never get back. You
wouldn't get back.
Blackballed.
Would you not be quite happy not to get back to the Glasgow Empire?
Money's money.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's a lot.
Money.
I mean, we consider that. People like it. I remember, for example, Bruce Forsyth, who started off as. I think it was the boy wonder accordionist.
Was he?
Right,
Was
aye. He was only about 14 or 15, and he played the accordion. And he said, I remember him in an interview in the telly many, many years ago saying things like, I was only getting, this is like 1950s, right, as a boy, a teenager. And he was saying, 1950s, and I was only getting £8 a week.
Ooh.
£8 a week in the 50s.
A lot in the 50s.
Was a load of money.
Yeah.
Load of money for a.
I'm just going to jump in and say, Tommy, I think that would be in the 40s, because he was really old. If he was a teenager, I think he'd be born about 1930. So for him to be a teenager, it would be the 40s.
90,
so that makes it even worse, doesn't it?
No, but certainly it could have been.
We were actually just talking about him in the way in
very
today.
young,
we were just saying what a
like
talentless man he was, and yet how completely successful he was. I mean, he could do a wee bit of dancing, but
played a piano, but
I mean, he just had balls.
Total chancer.
I think he just had balls, just confidence, just confidence,
absolute confidence.
No ability,
lots
of confidence. And made a lot of money through it.
Aye.
But I also heard he wasn't a particularly nice person. That's what they say.
So they say.
So they do say he's a bit arrogant, and has he got a right to be arrogant? You have to ask that question. But so the other thing I discovered when I was looking at a wee bit of research was a show that came on. Stuart was reminding me, he thinks it was 1950s. They called the 8:05 show. Do you remember that,
Alhambra.
Tommy? The Alhambra. It was Stanley Baxter, Ricky Fulton, and Jimmy Logan. They're the three main guys, aren't they, really, from Scotland? It says a song and dance and laughter show. And also Kenneth McKellar was in it. And the choreography was by Lionel Blair.
Right.
So imagine him surviving in the 50s in Glasgow. He must have known where to go. Oh my goodness, it doesn't bear thinking about. It was a rough place. But when you think about the reputation, of Glasgow then, you're just getting back to these English comedians. I mean, I think it takes some real guts to even come in the first place. Or maybe they're just so confident, these people, that they don't really care. They're going to get paid one way or another. So does it really matter? I just think I'm humiliated even listening to it. It's awful. Have you got any memories of the 8:05 show? Because I personally don't have any.
I never saw it.
No.
Right. Well, I do remember going there to a 8:05 show, but I would be very, very young, and I don't really remember. I do remember there's a singer called David Hughes, who's a kind of Welsh. I remember him being there. I think I saw a pantomime there as well.
I think our mum and dad went to it.
It was really popular. Looking back on it said from the minute it came on, it must have just been at the right time for a really strong Scottish variety show, and it was very, very, very popular.
We're going for years.
That time.
I bet you went for about 10 years.
Easy.
Maybe even more than that.
It was the big show. It was, as you're saying, they had, I would just say Kenneth McKellar, for example, and they would have there was this Scottish accordionist called Will Starr.
I remember
Will Starr, Will Starr, right?
Yes,
he would come in and he would play all the Scottish. So that a Scottish audience, play Scottish students to a Scottish audience.
Love it. Have you got any memories for us, Tommy, personal ones of those days when in the Apollo or the Greens Playhouses, it would have been called, or the bands then? Did you go and see any of these kind of like super famous
the
guys?
pavilion that we were talking about, the only person I did see, Andrew Gold. Do you remember Andrew Gold?
Why do I remember Andrew Gold?
Well, he had a few hit singles.
Never Let It Fade Away.
Never Let It Fade Away,
yeah.
and Lonely Boy.
Oh,
remember
yeah.
that? I saw Andrew Gold at the
Right.
pavilion with a band there, whose father wrote the theme to Exodus, the film.
Oh,
right.
A
So
musical
he was
family.
really came for a musical
Probably a New
family.
Andrews family.
No, that's right. Aye. No, that's.
But imagine people like Bowie, T-Rex. I mean, they must have been fairly the start of their careers, I would think, was it not?
I
at
can
that
tell you a
time?
story about in the Electric Gardens round about in
yeah.
the late 60s. Eddie and my pal Eddie Cairns and I used to go, and they used to have bands on a Saturday. It was big local bands, and I occasionally did concerts. Like Deep Purple, for instance, played there once.
Oh my
Maybe more than
goodness.
once.
Wow.
But they started to do a kind of unusual, like a Monday night. They were trying to do something. It was like avant-garde kind of pop, and Marianne Faithfull did one and get booed off.
Oh, aye. Easy.
And David
easy.
Bowie did one and get booed off as well. He was still playing acoustic and kind of weird stuff. And
Yeah.
did
I
not
don't
go
know
down
if
well.
Avant-Garde and the Electric Gardens crowd kind of
Oh no, they were
goes-
two different crowds completely.
Two different,
Aye.
isn't it, really? For
But, so there was quite, they tried a few things like that, but I'm just saying Bowie get booed off in Glasgow as well.
Marianne Faithfull must have been known for getting booed off in Glasgow. So because I saw her getting booed off at the Odeon Cinema,
Did you?
and crying and going off in tears as tears go by.
Oh yes,
The tears went right
yes.
off the stage. No, because
As if
she's-
Glasgow people could care
no,
Do you know
at
what?
all.
They were all
No.
just she
Get
was this
off.
wee weak voice.
And completely tuneless as
That
well, Tommy. She
absolutely
couldn't
sang-
hold a note or
singing
anything.
and she
Aye.
started singing. Somebody, I don't know who, somebody come up with this. You only need a guitarist, right? Now, this was when there's all these pop. Jerry and the
knocking about-
Pacemakers and all that were all
Was she
banging
knocking
their
about with the Rolling
tunes out.
Stones
as
that's
well,
right.
wasn't
She was.
Well, Mick Jagger wrote the song for her as
That's
Tears
right.
Goes By.
That was the I think that was the first song that they wrote.
right.
As Tears Go By, as I say, Andrew Oldham, their manager at the time, had actually said to them, "Look, the Beatles are writing all these songs, and you're writing nothing." And they locked him in a room, and he
Ooh,
said,
did they?
"I'm not letting you out of this room till you write a song."
Or
And
till
they
the
wrote
drums
As
run out.
Tears Go By,
Till the
and
drums run
that
out.
was a song. But it wasn't for them. And Marianne Faithfull took it, and there's that.
Well, that was the best day of their lives. Look at the money they made through their
that went
songs.
on. But she came on in one of these pop packages and started to sing, or
Big
tried to
mistake.
sing
Big mistake.
in this wee quiet voice. And you can just, it just started, the rumblings, and then everybody,
Murder.
shouting,
Murder.
"We can't hear you, hen. Can't hear you."
Yeah.
Oh, no. And it was all that.
And-
Oh, you're rotten. You're rotten. Oh, no. And it was just, she could only hear shouts. She wouldn't know exactly
What was being said,
with
aye.
the
She'd pick up the
vernacular,
aggression,
but she easily,
Pick up the aggression.
the vibe was not good, as they say.
Absolutely.
And
was
the
a-
next minute, she was, she started bubbling. And
That would
off.
make them worse. I mean,
I
that
tell you, I remember listening to this on Radio Clyde when she was in Scotland, and I think you were on a Radio Clyde thing once where they asked you. It was like a picking a pops thing. They asked you, what you thought of certain records, and then they were going to conversation.
That's right,
and they
aye.
did this one. How do you relax? So there's maybe 3 people on the panel, and Marianne Faithfull's one of them. Now Marianne is barely awake. She is totally and they actually had the brass neck to say, "Now Marianne, how do you relax?"
dreading the answer.
And she's just mumbling something. They think, we really shouldn't ask her that,
No.
because she's quite relaxed as it
Keep it,
is.
relaxed.
So relaxed she can barely speak.
Relaxed as a newt, as they say.
Totally. Aye. Do you think that, well, you'll know, Tommy, do you think that the Glasgow audiences are the same today? I mean, we have talked about how difficult the Glasgow audiences were then. Not difficult, but I mean, how kind of truthful they were. If they didn't like you, they made no bones about it. But if they liked you, all good.
The most recent the most recent heckling that I was witnessed was Whitney Houston, actually,
Oh my goodness.
at the SEC, when she decided to go into this long spiel about her family history, who her auntie was Dionne Warwick and Thelma Houston and this that, and she had these photographs, a backdrop that were showing her.
Nobody's
This
interested.
is Thelma Houston. She was a great gospel singer, and she sang with my auntie and that. Somebody shouted, "Just shut up, give us a song, hen." Right? And she obviously they don't know. They
What
know
usually
that, as you say, they understand the aggression of it, but they don't know
not good.
exactly what was
What's the
said.
message? What's the
You know,
message?
right away.
Or I don't want to know the
just
message.
shut up, just shut up, give us a song.
Aye.
Oh, then a few people that so, and I'm sure she cut the whole thing short and started
Aye.
singing
Aye.
again.
Aye. Keep that for London.
so-
It'll go down well
Aye,
there.
right.
I was saying to Stuart that Ralph and I went to see a comedian in the SECC maybe 4 or 5 months ago. What's that Cockney guy called again? He's so funny.
I don't
Flanagan.
know.
Mick Flanagan, we just absolutely love him. And he did say towards the end of the show, because he's getting a wee bit old now, so he's getting a wee bit forgetful, on stage, which is fine. But he was saying, I have to be honest and say, I'm always nervous when I come to Glasgow, because you don't know what you fuckers are going to be like. He said, I'm fine when we go to Edinburgh. So even with his Cockney accent, he says, the Morningside and all that. He said, I'm fine there. He said, but see with you lot, we're always dead nervous. So I suppose I've answered my own question. I suppose that's
You're
still
still
that.
here.
That's aye. And he was absolutely brilliant, and he just went down a storm. So I've also witnessed a real warmth in a Glasgow audience if you're doing well. But I can't imagine what it would be like to be the other way around. So I don't think that's a bad reputation to have, is it? If you're just completely honest with
The
people.
thing about things is, and now is these shows that we're talking like the 8:05 show and things like that. They were variety shows, so comedians would be on them, and that you don't know. I mean, now you go and see comedians. Everybody who's there knows them and likes them, even
Yeah,
if they're
that's why
rotten.
you've come.
See, like that Scottish guy we saw in California. What's his name again? Fucking couldn't. He started off in the States as being the weatherman. And we couldn't believe he had his own
Is
show.
that Ross?
Ross,
Aye.
what's his name? Ross
King.
what? Ross King.
Ross King.
No, it's not Ross
No.
King.
No.
He's the guy that works with. He does TV.
He does the showbiz thing.
Yeah, but this guy's
in
a
the morning.
comedian.
And in fact,
actually-
he's Ross King's pal.
Is that
Aye,
Craig
Ross-
Ferguson?
Craig Ferguson.
Oops, that's exactly who it was.
Fucking terrible.
He did
awful.
a late night show
That's
for
right.
years. In
the
fact,
States.
In America.
the one that James Corden took over.
Right.
Was that the
And he
Late
was-
Late Show or
The
something?
Late Show.
He was very popular
we
on that,
couldn't
wasn't he? He was
believe-
very successful, wasn't it, Tom?
We're sitting watching the telly, California, and I thought, Craig Ferguson. I've got a show with Craig Ferguson in it.
It was a whole documentary about his tour, remember?
And just people, American people, loving it. We thought, this guy couldn't play in the UK. He's so bad. And he was terrible.
He was awful.
But people are rolling about laughing. But that's my point, though. You got people who go and see acts now. They all know them and they love them. Therefore, they don't really get a chance to be heckled because there's nobody there who's neutral. Whereas the old theatre shows, they would bring a comedian you never heard of,
Yeah.
and he would just have to bite the bullet.
Yeah.
You know him, you don't know him, you like him, you don't like him, and they would let you know. So that doesn't really happen now.
So it's still the same, I think, to some degree. But as you say, the tickets are so expensive now to go and see a comedian. So if you buy your ticket, you expect it to be a good show. And even if it's somebody you like and the material's not that good, I mean, that guy's a wee bit older and the material wasn't just as funny. But you have to say to yourself, well, to some degree, Billy Connelly became a bit like that because it's got to be, you've got to run out of stuff at some point, particularly when you're talking about domestic humour and observational humour. But we really enjoyed it. So on that note, that brings us to the end of this episode. So thank you very much for your company today. Remember that you can find the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and you can also see our reels on our social media platforms on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye from me, Christine.
Bye.
And Tommy.
And bye from me.
Okay.